Good competition is the name of the game. I've been doing a lot of talking over the last couple of days, so you'll have to pardon the sort of more toned down demeanor and the raspier voice in this video. I spent a couple weeks with the Galaxy S21, and I'm getting into my second software update on the OnePlus 9 and the 9 Pro. I think OnePlus has made the better phone this year. I think it's interesting trying to track the philosophy of these brands. OnePlus is trying to push their top phone line into a more premium category. Samsung is whittling back on features to arrive at a lower cost. In terms of change from generation over generation, Samsung is trying to muscle in on OnePlus's turf here. OnePlus defined this market. Instead of hot takes about how OnePlus needs to justify their pricing, I think we should be a touch more critical of the market leader trying to swing lower. But looking at the phones specifically, you get more phone for your buck with OnePlus today. Jumping right in, OnePlus maintains a higher tier of performance. I was really concerned with how Samsung handled heat and how poorly the S21 performed in my testing. Outside of short benchmarks, the S21 rarely bested phones from last year. I think it's critical to point out it doesn't seem like Samsung is properly cooling this new SoC. And instead, it just pre-throttles the CPU out of the box. They deserve credit for launching at a lower price, but even at this lower price, we're still in premium phone territory. And in many applications, a Galaxy S10 can still hang close to an S21. The Snapdragon 888 is a thirsty component. It does draw a lot of power, but OnePlus hasn't shown the same issues. Now, there are still apps that need to be optimized for this new hardware. That's true of both phones, but in longer use, photo editing, compression, and especially in gaming, the OnePlus 9s run more consistently and at a higher tier. There is no enhanced mode in the OnePlus battery settings because the phone just comes out of the box enhanced. Those hardware advantages extend to the battery tech too. OnePlus has faster wired and wireless charging, and they include a fantastic charger in the box. This 45-watt power delivery brick can also top off our laptops, so for a true oranges to oranges comparison against a Samsung, you also need to add the cost of a fast charger, and you should probably throw in a screen protector too. The camera conversation has a little bit more back and forth to it though. Outside the anecdotal personal preferences or what you're most familiar with, the 9 Pro scores a few more victories that help nudge it over an S21 Plus. The main sensor on the 9 Pro is closer to the S21 Ultra in terms of sensor size and pixel binning HDR technology. And the ultra-wide sensor on the 9 Pro is larger than the main sensor on the S21. These sensors are better at soaking up light, are faster for low light shots, and can produce slightly softer background blur. Because OnePlus can maintain a higher tier of performance, we get smoother 8K video at 30 frames per second and an incredible 4K at 120 frames per second from both the main and the ultra wide. In my early sample shots, the OnePlus delivered these samples with more consistent output, fewer dropped frames, and less stuttering in the camera app. And don't get me started on the folks that are complaining about the 2-megapixel sensor on the OnePluses. Oh, gimmicks are bad. No one should ever pay for a gimmick on a phone. Oh yeah. I wonder, what might we be able to do with a dedicated sensor for soaking up additional light? It's a complete and total mystery. If only tech influencers would actually use the phones they're reviewing. The S21s are going to score a solid victory for telephoto use, especially against the OnePlus 9. The crop sensor on the S21 produces nicer images at the farther end of the zoom. It's very clear to see. And if you shoot video using manual modes, the Samsung Pro Video is nicely feature complete. It's almost as good as what we had on LG for really dialing in a specific look and feel for your video. Now that we have a second update out for the OnePluses, I feel more confident getting started on my camera deep dive. But already, in early shooting, the video has been smoother and nicer to look at. The app has performed better, just plain better in heavy shooting. OnePlus shocked me, landing some incredible dim indoor shots of Lex in action. That's really tricky for all phones. I personally shoot way more from the ultra wide than the telephoto, and Samsung doesn't offer any kind of special macro mode at this price, and OnePlus remains the only brand to offer camera switching at 4K at 60 frames per second. Not even Apple has pulled that off. Don't we ever get tired of this review dance? Every year, a new OnePlus comes out, and techies focus on the embargo week reviews complaining about camera performance and then completely ignore all the follow-ups that genuinely improve camera output. The OnePlus 8 Pro was a truly premium flagship competitive camera, and the 9 Pro takes us all a step further. Last year was the strongest camera performance we've ever seen from a OnePlus, and this year is looking better. By contrast, the Galaxy S21 and 21 Plus are largely lateral moves from the cameras we had last year on the S20. And as I've had issues with the camera app stuttering and the phone shutting off video clips without giving me any kind of thermal warning, I'm not convinced the S21 represents an upgrade over the S20 for photography. All cameras, especially smartphone cameras, have different pros and cons. Just because OnePlus shoots a little different than a Samsung, it doesn't mean it's inferior to a Samsung. This year, dollar for dollar, and depending on your specific needs in a camera, I think OnePlus has the edge. A lot of the rest of this comparison comes down to more subjective personal preferences. I don't like sideways scrolling app drawers and generally prefer the look of Oxygen OS over One UI. That's not worth digging into much or scoring points. They're both fine for heavier Android skins. Samsung is making longer promises on software support though. That might be a point of consideration. We'll need to see how well Samsung lives up to that promise, but it's a welcome talking point in Android land. That said, while Samsung is putting out more regular patches, I don't think Samsung really is doing a better job of addressing issues like camera app performance and battery draw over manufacturers that put out bi-monthly patches. You're getting more, but I don't know that it's always better. I'm a hardware guy, so the main concern I have about software support out to 4 years is more hardware based. If the S21 is throttled out of the box and still performing poorer for battery life, I think it's far more likely that a consumer will face issues with battery degradation impacting performance more than a lack of updates into 4 years of use. My first full charge on the 9 Pro, I went 40 hours of light, moderate use with over 7 hours of screen on time. That's with no battery conditioning data. There's no way my S21 could have landed those kinds of numbers. And several friends of mine are complaining about miserable runtime on the S21 Ultra with the current software patches. And this is why we need to handle this stuff with a little nuance. I'm not trying to dismiss software support or software concerns, but it's easy to get hyped up on one claim and exaggerate the impact of that one data point. The real world performance of these pocket computers, nothing is ever finished. All phones have issues. They all need regular maintenance. I wouldn't say there's any clear winner over this whole market if your use falls into somewhat average timelines, where consumers are apt to hold on to their phones a little more than 2 years. My advice for Samsung owners, same as I recommended to iPhone owners early last year. If you really think you're going to go more than 3 years, factor in the cost of a battery replacement over that time, and you should be fine. If you think you'll flip your phone around 3 years, then I don't believe OnePlus represents any serious compromises here. The main critical win I can award Samsung is DeX. DeX is an incredible feature to include on a phone, and it's one I wish consumers were taking more seriously. I think it's criminal. It's truly upsetting that Samsung has not used their awesome laptop and tablet division to make a proper screen dock for DeX phones. It's a great compute platform that easily outpaces most tablets and handily gives Chromebooks a run for their money. It's actually because of DeX. It's one of the reasons why I'm so concerned about Samsung's thermals and all the throttling, as a lot of those more computery tasks perform better on last year's Note. So even on a good sale, you're not really getting more phone on an S21. By comparison, on the OnePlus, Android has a simple shell of a desktop mode, which you can activate on the 9 and 9 Pro. It's really not worth it. I mean, it's fun to play with, but I wouldn't try and rely on it. I do not rank this lightly. If you're struggling to get a new computer for work, or you need something fast to get your kids connected to school, DeX on an S10 or newer is an incredible resource. Pair it with a cheap monitor and a keyboard and mouse, maybe even get like fancy with a laptop hub or some kind of dock, and it really is a robust compute option. Whew. All right, that was a lot of talking. Let's start bringing this home. Comparing similar prices, the OnePlus 9 slots in as a nice competitor against the S21, and the 9 Pro is the right match alongside the S21 Plus. Alongside advertising, that MSRP represents a claim from the manufacturer. The retail price is where they position that product. So folks acting like a 9 Pro should be compared against an S21 Ultra, well, that's giving Samsung a $200 advantage. So yeah, that should buy you $200 more phone. But sales and trade-in deals. I don't feel like I should have to spell this out, but OnePluses have sales and trade-ins and carrier deals too. If anything, Samsung's aggressive price cutting weeks after launch is a bad thing for those of you who might care about that precious resale value. In the United States, Samsung is trying to play like Walmart these days. I'm always going to be happy to hear someone got a good deal on a phone, but that's not oranges to oranges. It's a lazy way to rig a win for the world's largest smartphone manufacturer. If you're a reviewer and you can only conceive of a Samsung versus OnePlus comparison by considering the Galaxy on sale and the OnePlus at full MSRP, then you're not very good at this tech stuff. I don't think you should be making purchasing recommendations to consumers, but I digress. In conclusion, I think OnePlus built the better phone this year. They delivered a more considered approach to the thermals. The OnePlus 9s are improved over their predecessors instead of whittled back to hit lower price points. Samsung is upsetting their own resale value, and thanks to Samsung's pivot lower in the market, what passes for a premium tier phone is on more equal footing. We should actually be really excited about this. The two brands have never competed this directly. But I think Samsung swung the pendulum back too far on cost savings, and now they're trying to make up for it after the fact by throttling their phones and pushing aggressive sales. Just because you can jump through some hoops to get an S21 for a little less, it doesn't mean it's a better phone. As always, thanks so much for watching, for sharing these videos, subscribing to the channel. Supporting your favorite content creators has never been more critical than it is today, so I greatly appreciate those of you who are checking out the links in the description below. Maybe you're shopping a little merch. That kind of stuff really does help keep production rolling on this channel. You can find a full list of all my affiliates and partnerships over on SomeGadgetGuy.com, or you might consider, just maybe, joining the list of names scrolling by on your screen from my Patreon, patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. This list represents basically the coolest tech pals on the web, so I hope you'll check them out. Now, you know where you can find me around the rest of the internet at SomeGadgetGuy on the Twitters and the Twitch. Probably not on the Facebooks, maybe a little on the Instagrams, and I will catch you all on the next review.